Hello, my most beloved and murderous horde, and welcome back to Part 2, Serial Killers Battle of the Sexes. There are just a handful of myths on female serial killers and serial killers in general that I would like to clear up before ending this conversation. I will admit, this is not as detailed of a video as I would like, but I do hope you enjoy it anyway. So, without further ado, you know the drill by now, my lovelies. Pick your poison, sit back, relax, and let us continue our previous conversation. Myth number 1. The female serial killer is but a reluctant sidekick to a violent, predatory male serial killer who, but for the devious influence of said male, would have lived a law-abiding life. The reality is that this myth is for the most part untrue. The media likes to push this idea that women are completely incapable of very real, if horrific, aspects of the human psyche. Though it is true that some female members of such deadly duos were in fact coerced into pathological relationships by an abusive spouse, family member, or romantic partner, those cases are not at all limited to a heterodynamic, and are also a relatively small percentile of such duos, and contribute to an even smaller percent of female serial killers in general. This myth is not the rule, but in fact the exception, and is but the tip of the iceberg when it comes to female serial killers. First and foremost, much like their male counterparts, most female serial killers prefer to commit their crimes alone. But when serial killers do pair up, the dynamics between the two individuals can differ quite a lot. You can have anything from the male-dominated dynamic that was seen between Wayne Williams and Deborah Brown, to the equal partnership dynamic that was seen with Carla Homlaka and Paul Bernardo, all the way to the female-dominated Miranda Barber and Elliot Barber type. Now, while it is relatively rare for the female partner in a male-female killing team to lead the charge, as Miranda Barber proved, this does in fact happen. Myth number 2. The female serial killer is either A. so physically unappealing that she was unable to function in society, and her motive is to take revenge on the society for her cruel and unjust treatment, or B. she is such a gorgeous femme fatale that the men she murdered were simply helpless in the face of her beauty and sexual wiles. The reality of this myth is that it is a complete Hollywood construct, and in all actuality, most female serial killers are pretty average-looking. In fact, most of the time, the female serial killer is the kind of person a parent would very much like their child to bring home as a prospective partner. How is this? Well, the female serial killer is typically relatively young, mid-late 20s to early 30s. Economically speaking, she is middle class. She is very personable and at least of average intelligence, personal being at least on the surface level, as again they are social chameleons. And, most interestingly, the female serial killer typically works in a career field that has her with vulnerable people in traditionally feminine professions that normally hold some sort of social notoriety. Such careers are nursing, teaching, and caregiving. She may even be a Sunday school teacher. This is a myth that is not at all based in reality, and is one of the more infuriating ones in my personal opinion. Myth number 3. The female serial killer is an out-of-control man-hater bent on revenge, only taking male victims. Most infuriating myth of all time. The general idea of this myth is that women only become serial killers because they are made into them by the abusive hands of men in society, or, something similar. Female serial killers are just as likely to murder women and children as they are to kill men, and typically they go after very vulnerable victims and ones that they know very well, even building up a trust with their victims. In the United States, more than half of female serial killers have had at least one female victim, and more than 30% of them have murdered at least one child. And, while revenge is occasionally a motive for female serial killers, it is by far more likely and by far more common that her motive is simply cold, hard cash. Myth number 4. All serial killers are simply insane. Oh joy. My favorite myth of all time has returned. As I have pointed out in at least 2 other videos now, insanity is not a psychological term. It is a legal term, and only a legal term. But if we're going to argue this, fine. Speaking on a psychological level, the stereotypical psychotic serial killer is by far more myth than reality. Now, while serial killers are much more likely to exhibit antisocial personality disorders such as sociopathy or more likely psychopathy, these are not considered to be mental illnesses by the American Psychiatric Association or the APA. In fact, the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, which was released by the APA most recently in 2013, lists both sociopathy and psychopathy under the heading of an antisocial personality disorder. And furthermore, when it comes to psychopaths and sociopaths, they are not quote-unquote insane. They both are very well aware of what they're doing and understand the consequences of their actions. Neither of these personality disorders involve a diminished capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong, or what is reality and what is fantasy. In fact, very few serial killers in general suffer from any mental illness or neurobehavioral disorder to such a debilitating extent that they are considered to be insane by the criminal justice system. Once again, this is due to the extremely narrow legal definition of insanity, which simply does not apply to most psychopathic serial killers. Even David Berkowitz, the infamous son of Sam, who told police tales of satanic rituals and demonic possession, was found to be competent enough to stand trial for his murders following his arrest in 1977. Now, sadly, there is very little psychological research done on serial killers that focuses on their mentality and of the inner workings of their brains, and this is for 2 reasons. 1, because serial killers are in fact relatively rare, and 2, because most research done on them is used for profiling and to aid the police when trying to capture said serial killers when they do pop up. Myth number 5. All serial killers are heterosexual, white males. Contrary to popular mythology, and I do mean mythology, no, not all serial killers are white, male, or even heterosexual. Serial killers span all sexualities, racial, and ethnic groups in the United States and in all other countries. And as the now 10 videos on my channel have very clearly proven, no, they are not all males. The racial diversity of serial killers generally mirrors that of the overall population in any given country. In fact, African Americans comprise of the largest racial minority group among serial killers, representing approximately 20% of the total. But of course, this myth exists almost completely because of Hollywood. A few prolific examples of racial minority serial killers would be Carl Eugene Watts, who is known as the Sunday Morning Slasher, Anthony Edward Sowell, who is known as the Cleveland Strangler, Rafael Resendez Ramirez, who is known as the Railroad Killer, and, perhaps most importantly and most recently, a one Samuel Little, who, as of October of last year, is believed and is listed as, by the FBI, as the most prolific serial killer in all of United States history, with a victim count currently at 93 potential victims and climbing as the investigation into those claims and murders continue. Now, as for sexuality, it really shouldn't surprise anyone who has been subscribed to my channel for any notable length of time that, yes, some of the most well-known and prolific serial killers were, in fact, LGBT. A few of these being Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Gary Ray Bowles, and Aileen Wuornos, just to name a few. Myth number 6. All serial killers travel widely to find, kill, and dispose of their victims. The reality of it is that the roaming homicidal maniac, such as Freddy Krueger in the cult film A Nightmare on Elm Street, is just another entertainment media stereotype that is very rarely found in real life. Now, among the most infamous serial killers, Ted Bundy is the rare exception of those who have traveled and killed on the interstate and have done so very widely. Now, unlike Bundy, most serial killers actually have a very well-defined geographical area of operation. They typically have a bit of a comfort zone. That is, an area that they are intimately familiar with and where they like to stalk and kill their victims. Jack the Ripper actually provides a classic example of this geographical preference, seeing as he stalked and killed exclusively in the small Whitechapel district of London in the fall of 1888. Myth number 7. All serial killers are isolated and dysfunctional loners. Real-life serial killers are not at all the isolated monsters of fiction, and frequently they do not appear to be strange or stand out from the public in any meaningful way whatsoever. Many serial killers are able to successfully hide out in plain sight for extended periods of time. This is because they blend in. They are employed and have been for long periods of time. They are typically married and or have families. They own homes and they are active in their community or church group. Overall, they simply do not appear to be at all threatening and are simply seen as normal members of society. Ted Bundy, for example, volunteered answering phones for the suicide hotline and even wrote a pamphlet on rape prevention. John Wayne Gacy dressed up as a clown for children's birthday parties. And Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, was a Boy Scout leader and was a very active member in his church, even serving as the elected president of the church council. Because serial killers can appear to be so innocuous, they are often overlooked by law enforcement officials as well as their own families and peers. Serial killers who hide out in plain sight are able to do so precisely because they look and act just like everyone else. Myth number 8. Sex motivates all serial killers. As I have stated in 3 different videos now, this is very much false. Now, there are some serial killers who are in fact motivated by sex, but this is only a very small fraction of the entire group of serial killers. In fact, for male serial killers, the most common subtype is what is called the power-orientated subtype, and their primary motive is pretty self-explanatory. For female serial killers, however, the most common motive and subtype is what is called the comfort gain killer or comfort gain subtype. They are seeking financial gain or a material possession, and it is through this that they achieve a more comfortable lifestyle. It is also perhaps the oldest recognized and the least complicated subtype of serial killers. Myth number 9. Serial killers either want to be stopped or simply stop on their own. Now, while it could be possible, as it is not completely impossible, I personally cannot think of any particular case, nor did I find any particular case where it had been proven that the serial killer simply just stopped killing and then went on to live a law-abiding life. It is actually highly unlikely, statistically speaking, for this event to occur. It is actually by far more likely that the serial killer had events or circumstances occur in their life that would make it appear that they have stopped killing. Now, such things can include, but are not at all limited to, sexual substitutions, increased participation in family activities, the serial killer becoming physically unable to continue killing, i.e. incarceration for an unrelated crime, health issues, or maybe they have simply moved to a different location, or the serial killer themselves have passed away. Now, as for the wanting to be stopped, this is mostly false. I'd say 99.99999% false, to my knowledge. The law enforcement, academic, and mental health experts who developed the FBI serial killer report actually state that as serial killers gain experience with killing, they gain confidence with each offense. They develop a feeling that they will never be identified and thus will never be caught. But killing someone and then disposing of their body is, as you would imagine, not an easy task. And as the serial killer gains confidence in their process, they can begin to take shortcuts, and that leads to them making mistakes. And their mistakes are our gain, as these mistakes can lead to them being identified by law enforcement, being caught, and eventually being convicted. Now, I say it is 99.99999% false because there is one possible exception that I know of very vaguely, and that is the case of Paul Michael Stefani, an American serial killer who is also known as the weepy-voiced killer, due to a series of telephone calls that he made to police, anonymously reporting his crimes in a remorseful and high-pitched voice. And finally, myth number 10. All serial killers are... What? Are y'all... I don't know when, or why, or how this damn weeaboo shit got into this genre, or why this myth exists, but it needs to fucking go, and it needs to go now. No! Serial killers are not yanderes. You do not live in an anime. They're serial killers. They are dangerous individuals. They are not your kawaii. You are not their senpai. Or vice versa. I really wish that I was kidding when I came across this myth. I really wish this was a joke. But it's not. It's really not. Y'all need Odin or Jesus or something and some professional fucking help. Yeah, that's it. No, I'm done. That is all the sanity I can spare for one video. I can't do it anymore. I swear, y'all are trying to give me an ulcer. Stay inside. Wash your damn hands. Stay safe. And remember, my lovelies, haunting dreams and blessed be.